Hey, this is Donald from Padlock Technologies, dual CCIE, here to talk about MS Chat v2 versus EAP TLS for authenticating with ISE. A lot of people always ask this question, which one should you pick? Obviously, there's one that is more secure than the other one, but it really depends on ease of implementation versus being a more secure solution. So let's look at the comparison. Let's get down to the whiteboard and I'll show you what the differences are. So from a technology perspective, we have MS Chat v2 versus EAP TLS. Now there are multiple flavors with this. With MS Chat v2, this is usually going to be PEEP, protected EAP, MS Chat v2. EAP TLS, you don't need to use protected EAP, right? You don't need to do that. Now, I'm going to give you a little backstory. There's an inner method and there is a outer method. So that terminology is very important in this comparison. With PEEP MS Chat v2, the outer method is PEEP. The inner method is MS Chat v2, which is basically username and password, right? When you hear me say MS Chat v2, username and password, I believe as of me making this video, it's an NTLM hash v2 hash, or it's a v2 hash, I believe, but it's username and password, right? So how this works is there's going to be a protected EAP tunnel. So this is the PEEP, all right? And this is technically the outer method. And then your credentials, which is username and password, is going to be sent through there, and it's MS Chat v2. Believe it's a NTLM v2 hash, right? With EAP TLS, this is certificate based, right? So there's going to be a certificate on your machine. You're going to send that certificate over to ISE to get authenticated and look at some values, and then you'll have your authorization policy on that. Now with EAP, or with EAP TLS, you can also have PEEP, you can have TEEP, you can have on MS Chat v2, you can send that through EAPfast as well, which is Cisco proprietary protocol in there. So with the PEEP and TEEP in EAP TLS, same functionality though. So it'd be a PEEP tunnel, or PEEP, or TEEP, and then the certificate, which is EAP TLS, will be sent through that tunnel. So this is just extra padding on top of an extra layer of security on top of sending the either username and password or the certificate to ISE. Now, there is extra overhead when you do PEEP with EAP TLS. MS Chat v2, you almost have to use PEEP because it won't even let you do MS Chat v2 regular, right? Now, from a security standpoint, EAP TLS, TEEP with EAP TLS, PEEP with EAP TLS. Now the thing with TEEP, you can do something called EAP chaining, but that's another video, but I would say that's a benefit of this. You could do EAP chaining with EAPfast with MS Chat v2 if you wanted to, but EAPfast forces you to use the secure client or any Connect client. So you got to be careful with that, right? You can use TEEP as well. I forgot you can use TEEP as well. I don't want just somebody saying, oh, you can use TEEP with MS Chat v2 as well. So yes, you can use TEEP with MS Chat v2 and do EAP chaining as well. So you don't technically have to use EAPfast for any of the EAP chaining functionalities anymore. That has now, I mean, most people we're deprecating EAPfast in a lot of places because you don't need it now that you have TEEP. Now there is credential guard with this. This is something you have to look out for. If you're going to use TEEP with MS Chat v2, you might get bitten by credential guard, which doesn't want you to use MS Chat v2. This is Microsoft basically forcing people to use certificates and not MS Chat v2. So if you're going to use TEEP, you might as well use certificates. Now, what are the differences between the two? MS Chat v2 is easier to implement. All right, is, let's say, easy. MS Chat v2 goes off a username and password. You don't need an internal PKI. You don't need to set up a CA server, root CAs, sub CAs, intermediate CA. You don't have to do any of that. You just turn on wireless wired or wireless 802.1x authentication, and it automatically do MS Chat v2. You do not have to do anything else other than that. With certificates, as I just mentioned, well, you need some type of PKI, right? And that's public key infrastructure. You need something that, so you need the CA, you need an entire trust. So CA, intermediates, needs to be built, subs, whatever you want to call them, all right? Then you need to push out the certificates to all the supplicants. Now, a supplicant is basically a machine, right? And from a certificate standpoint, there are user certificates, and let me put that in here. So you need to push the certificates. So user or computer certs, or both. I usually recommend both. Computer certs need to be pushed out. Now, there are plenty of methods to push out, these certificates. There is, your traditional GPO, group policy object. There is, if you're doing Entra ID and you want to use Intune, or basically Intune, and you want to use Intune to push the certificates, well, then you got to use something called a cert connector. And that will connect to the NDES server. So you still need to use an NDES server for this. And you can use either SCEP or PKC-S12. I'm partial to SCEP because it's a lot easier. Then you have SCEPman, which is that's for people who don't have an internal PKI and they just want to use something in the cloud for that. So you would spin up, now there's a cost to this. You would spin up SCEPman, and that would actually be the thing that pushes certificates, or you get certificates from SCEPman. But all of this needs to be in place before you can do certificate-based authentication. With MS Chat v2, that's it. You turn it on and you're done. So with ISE, usually comes security problems. So the issue with MS Chat v2 from a security standpoint is usernames and passwords can be stolen. And then you can turn on the 802.1x feature. You can turn it on any Windows, and as long as you have a login, a username and password that you can send to ISE, if you're just validating on MS Chat v2, now obviously you need to make it a bit more secure, but I'm saying worst case scenario, because I've seen this, is people just authenticate based on AD groups. So username and password gets stolen. The user is not locked out, like you didn't lock it out, so you don't know about, hey, my stuff got stolen to tomorrow. The person gets on your network based on the username and password credentials. Boom, they got access to everything that user had access to. So that's the issue with username and password, and why we do not recommend it unless this is a last ditch implementation. This is the last ditch effort here. Like, you're gonna do this as a Hail Mary pass. We don't really got anything else. We just got to do this, right? From a security perspective for certs, because there's harder to implement and there's a lot of things that need to put in place, this is more secure because of one thing. And if you don't do this, then it makes it's not secure anymore. If you do not allow the ability to export the cert, so no export of cert off the machine, it's secure. You know that that's that machine. Why? Because if I can't export that certificate with the private key onto another machine, then I know for a fact when I authenticate with this machine, and we're talking about computer certs, if I authenticate with this machine, with this cert, I know that that is that machine. Right now, there is something called posture in ISE that you could check to see if the certificate's on there, but doesn't make any sense. If I'm authenticating with certificates, I don't need to check to see if this certificate's on there. And I've had to talk people off the ledge of that because they wanted to, they want to do a posture check with, oh, is the cert on there? And I had to tell them, well, if you're authenticating with the cert, then it already tells me that the cert's on there. Because if you didn't have the cert on there, you wouldn't be able to authenticate with the cert. So it kind of makes sense, right? So what you want to do is you do not want to give the ability for the cert to be able to export the private key. That means if you take the key off of there and you try to import it, it's going to ask for the private key. Well, you don't have the private key, so you can't import it into another machine. So that's the difference between PEEP, MS Chat v2, and EAT TLS. If you are looking to implement ISE, this is the first thing you need to think about. Do you have all the necessary requirements to go with the most secure method, which is EAT TLS? If not, you'll have to do MS Chat v2. But I definitely suggest that you implement this as a temporary solution and then move to EAT TLS as fast as possible, right? Because it's almost guaranteed passwords are going to get stolen somewhere in your organization, right? It's not a if, it's a when. If you have not implemented ISE yet and you're looking to implement something like that for network access control, I'm going to put a link in the description for a discovery call, not a sales call. I don't know what you're doing, so I can't sell you immediately on the first call. I need to know where you are before I can take you where you need to go from a network access control perspective. Click the link in the description, schedule the discovery call. Let's find out how to get network access control in your environment rapidly, but securely. That's the key, securely. Once again, this is Donald from Padlock Technologies Dual CCIE. I hope this video was informative. Thank you and have a nice day.